Joining us today, coming from Harpers Ferry to speak to us, is the executive director of the agency that is the grandfather of all the trail lands, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. So I wanted to introduce Dave Startzell.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciated the Secretary's remarks particularly. I'm proud to say that my family can trace its roots back about 12 generations here in the Commonwealth to 1729. And my wife sometimes reminds me that my Pennsylvania Dutch heritage probably contributes to some of my personality traits like stubbornness, healthy skepticism, but also probably to my tenacity. And I suspect some of that same Dutchman DNA flows through the veins of at least some of the organizers involved with the AT Museum Society. When I first heard about this initiative, probably 10, 11 years ago from Larry, I thought, well, you know, good luck with that. And obviously it's a great tribute, endurance and persistence and tenacity of that group to make the AT Museum a reality that we honor here today. It's about honoring and recognizing those two categories of pioneers, the early volunteers and the early thru hikers who really created the inspiration for many thousands of hikers to follow in their footsteps. And together those two groups really have added a lot of texture, you might say, to the remarkable tapestry that is the Appalachian Trail. When I was leaving this morning, I was looking again over the program, and I noticed that one of the services that the museum hopes to provide is a paperback library of sorts for hikers that happen to be passing through, and I thought I would be among the first to add to that library, so I brought my only copy of what I think is probably one of the newest publications about the trail. By Stackpole Books, but appropriately enough, it's actually a reprint of some of the stories that first appeared in the two-volume Rodale series that was published back in the 1970s. And some of the stories that appear here are about some of the very people who are recognized in the museum. When I got here, I discovered that actually the book is on sale at the museum, and that the proceeds of those sales will benefit the museum. So I encourage all of you to pick up a book, and if my foreword bores you, certainly the stories of the hikers and the early volunteers won't. So thank you very much.
We have a special appearance today from Rebecca Harriet, who is the superintendent of the Harpers Ferry National Historic Park. I just want to mention that Pam Underhill, who normally would have been here today, had already agreed, without realizing today was the day for the museum, to appear at a special function at Bear Mountain State Park in New York. So she couldn't be here, but we have Rebecca instead.
I do bring greetings from Harpers Ferry National Historical Park, and on this wonderful addition and grand opening of the Appalachian Trail Museum. Unlike Dave having been skeptical, I remember going into the ATC office probably about 10 years ago, picking up the brochure and immediately sending money to the museum to help it move along. And I congratulate Larry and the board and all the society members who made it happen. Day hikers, through hikers, visitors will be inspired by the exhibits and programs that will be offered by this museum. However, this museum will not just tell these important stories of the trail, it will become part of that legacy for many, many years to come. As a hiker, not a through hiker, but a hiker, I look forward to coming through here at some point and seeing it from the trail side of things. The National Park Service is always in partnership with the Appalachian Trail, and we deeply wish the museum a lot of success in the many, many years to come as it becomes part of that Appalachian Trail legacy. Thanks a lot.
The Commissioner of Cumberland County to join us today, Rick Rovegno.
How many have read the Bill Bryson classic, A Walk in the Woods? How many can tell me what his definition of Pennsylvania was?
Where boots go to die.
Pennsylvania is the place boots go to die. So that's exactly right. So welcome to Cumberland County. I got asked to speak because I'm the resident hiking junkie on the Board of Commissioners, and I've had the pleasure of hiking the highlands of Scotland and the jungles of Southeast Asia and the Southern Rockies and kind of like all points in between. About exactly 1 year ago at this time, I was trying to decide where was my next international hiking excursion going to be, and I was considering going to New Zealand and walking from Christchurch to Milford across the Southern Alps. And I was contemplating what to do, and I frequently go out locally on the trail. And so one evening last May a year ago, I was out on a little section of the trail off Sheet Iron Roof Road. And I always introduce myself to people when I meet them on the trail. And a young lady was breaking down for camp for the night. It was getting towards dusk. And as soon as I started speaking with her, I realized I thought she was Australian. But I said, where are you from? She said, New Zealand. Really? Where? South Island. What town? Christchurch. So I went back, and she started lobbying me about going there, and I went back home, told my wife, I said, I think the decision's been made. So now I'm going to flash forward to April, just a few weeks ago. I'm sitting in around a fire in the Clinton River Gorge before crossing the McKinnon Pass over to Milford, and the fire was no small challenge because it had rained 10 inches that day, and the average rainfall in Fiordland's 29 feet. But I'm sitting there with a group of folks, and I'll try to get them all. There were Israelis, Lebanese, Dutch, Aussies, of course, and New Zealanders, Canadians, and some others, Germans. And so I asked them all, do you know about the Appalachian Trail? And 3/4 of the hands went up. Now I understand there was a lot of, shall we say, discussion about where to locate the museum. A lot of different communities wanted it. And I know that there was perhaps maybe even some heated discussion on where to locate that. But I want to share with you why the decision was made to locate it here, because my family's cabin is actually right up over this hill here, and I wanted an easy commute to the cabin, so I appreciate you locating it here. On a more serious note, thank you to all the volunteers, thank you to all our visitors coming here, and we do pledge on behalf of the Cumberland County Board of Commissioners that we're going to make you proud for having located the museum here in years to come.
Let It Be continues to help us out here. He helped wax the floor of the museum up until, what, 3 in the morning? Our next speaker almost needs no introduction, but I'll give one anyway, really short and sweet. He is the guy who was the first one to come up with the idea for this museum. How he did it, no one knows. As anyone realizes, when you're dealing with hikers, you're herding cats, and you know, I was one of the worst in terms of unanswered phone calls and emails and so forth. But somehow or other, it all came together, and the person responsible for it was Larry Luxenberg.
Thank you, Bill, and thanks for the overwhelming response here today. And it's really been gratifying to see the support that the museum has built over the years. And I know Bill's been involved since the very beginning. And you know, what he was talking about is the many times I called him up and asked for help. And at one point he stopped saying hello when I called, and he just said, what do you want now? And then at some point, I think it was sometime last year or two, he got caller ID, and then we had real problems. Coming after Commissioner Rovegno, it reminds me of one of the worst problems we had in organizing the museum. For our group, it's an acceptable thing to say, you know, I can't work now. Well, one of the main excuses is Penn State has a home game. But one of the other excuses is I'm going hiking. So I invited Commissioner Rovegno to speak, and he said, well, I'll be glad to do it. We can't talk about the speech now. I'm going hiking for a couple weeks. Call me after I'm back. At least he's got a phone. You know, a lot of our people don't have permanent addresses. They're hard to reach. So I have some cats, and actually Bill does too, and maybe herding cats is even a little easier. And for the cat lovers in the crowd, we do have a cat exhibit in the museum. The only cat who's done the whole trail. So one of the complaints we've got, we haven't told all the stories of the trail. We don't have an exhibit for dogs yet. We can't get to everything. As Dave knows more than anybody, there are thousands and thousands of stories of the trail to tell. And Secretary Quigley's grandchildren come back in 50 years. I don't think we'll have exhausted all the stories. There's tremendously interesting people and interesting things that we have to tell over the years, and no end of material to go. So this is a great day for us celebrating the opening, but we have much more still to tell. Like Bill and like some of the others, I'd like to salute some of the volunteers. I can't name everybody, but back in the corner here, our Vice President Terry Wilson, I think has done more work than just about anybody else in our group. Most of the rest of us are amateurs. She's a museum professional. This was my first museum. She's been doing it for 30 years, and she gave us a little adult supervision along the way. Sneaking into the back is another one of our museum professionals, our exhibit designer, and if you like the exhibits, you can thank her professionalism, Bonnie Ralston. But, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've had people that just practically moved into the museum. We actually had one that our painter, Louise, did actually move into the museum, painting it for 3 weeks. A 12-year marathon to get this going, but the last 72 hours was a sprint, and we got in under the wire. And as Bill mentioned, NAMI got us in finally under the wire, so we appreciate that. I'd like to just also cite 4 other people who've been involved from the very first meeting 12 years ago. Dave Startzell mentioned one earlier, Lori Pottinger over here on the side. Person I mentioned the museum idea to, and if she'd have said it's a bad idea, it would have saved me a lot of work. Noel DeCavalcante is somewhere around here, but in the back. Put in a tremendous amount of work. And the last one has been involved in the museum since the very beginning. Model T decided he'd rather preserve his marriage and separate his 50th anniversary in a more private setting, so we gave him the weekend off. And I'd also just like to conclude by citing one other person who's somewhere in the crowd, Tim Meserich, who was also involved and very instrumental in the early days of the museum. Let me conclude by just saying that we have the exhibits, we have the artifacts, and that really makes a museum. But for me, what's been special about this has been the process, the literally hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that have put so much work into building this. When you see a 1,000-square-foot museum, you have no idea how much work went into that, the care and love and affection, and that's all part of the special character of the Appalachian Trail community. Thank you.